Welcome to Ask the Latina. I'm your host, Terry Beltran. This program is about the opportunity to ask and learn from a Latina trailblazer, with the mission to inspire and motivate Latinas to enter a career where we just do not have enough representation. For more resources, visit our website, askthelelatina.com. Hello and welcome to Ask the Latina. My guest today is Denise Atarama, and she is a dietitian. I think this is an area that's so important. We need to focus on our community, and we need more Latinas in this. So I hope you'll enjoy it. Denise, thank you for being my guest today and sharing with us, what it's like to be a dietitian, especially as a Latina.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
And let's start with where you grew up, your heritage, and then going to high school and from there to college. Just that first beginning of where you started an interest here with where you're at today.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Mexico, in a city close to Mexico City. My entire family lived in Mexico. Growing up, my parents always told us that it would be nice to have someone to visit because we never had anyone to visit anywhere else. So I feel like we were highly encouraged to travel because my parents also like to travel. I am the youngest of three siblings, and so when I was in high school, after I graduated, I wasn't really sure what university to pick. I mean, in Mexico is very different. The application process, you basically can't just decide the year you're graduating or a few months before you're graduating where you want to go. You apply, and some private schools, they automatically accept you. Public universities are much more harder to apply to. Um, so at that time, I had decided to take a year off after I graduated from high school. And I knew I wanted to study nutrition because I've always loved food. I actually wanted to be a chef at first. But then as I got involved in the community, I saw a need for helping people through nutrition by teaching them or mentoring them or counseling. And that's where I shifted that gear to helping others. So I knew I wanted to study nutrition at that time. My options were going to Mexico City, and for a younger woman, um, I did not feel safe doing that, moving to Mexico City, probably an hour and a half away from home. I would probably have to find housing in that bigger city. So I was not really interested in doing that, just because nutrition was not as popular as it is these days.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a sabbatical year because I wanted to just really be sure where I wanted to go. During that year, I ended up traveling to different countries. I went to Spain, Morocco, and then I had a friend who lived in Mexico City who was from Massachusetts, and he was a missionary at my church at that time. So one of his offers was if you want to go as an international student, or not even as a student, he just said if you want to spend a few months in Massachusetts, I have connections that I can set up for you. So I moved to Massachusetts, and little by little, like I started exploding options about just finding schooling, what an exchange student would look like, what a international student would look like, and changing my visa. I was very fortunate to have a family who hosted me during that time, and they were actually great at helping me navigate all of that. I feel like that was a huge
Yeah.
huge foundation. and that I had at the time, and I was just truly blessed to have them because they actually became my sponsors in terms of the paperwork that needed to be done. So I started the process then to have a to apply for a student visa. And I first, unlike other people who apply from their country, I was actually already living here with a tourist visa. And I started applying to a community college in Massachusetts because that was probably the most realistic option. And I was admitted. Once I was admitted into that college, then I started the application process to have a international student visa.
Hmm. That sounds great. How did you get the sponsor, and how long did it take for you to get through with the visa process?
So my sponsor, like I said, it was nothing that I think the family didn't see coming. Honestly, this family was actually going to host me for 3 months, and that was the initial agreement. My mom came with me, but then this family saw the interest in me in wanting to study overseas, practice English. I really, at the time, I wasn't fluent in English, but because this family just invested their time, they have older children. At the time, they had already moved out of their home. So when I came in, they really just dedicated a lot of time in helping me, mentoring me, um, helping me read and write in English and all of those things. And it was just really um, there were no strings attached to. I mean, no, they just decided that they wanted to go forth with this process. They talked to my parents, and we finally made the decision to start this. So the process for the paperwork, I want to say that that was even harder than the actual residency process that I went through later on, just because there's so many things that they ask you to prove. An income of the family to make sure that the family is really just making the family is sponsoring you, that you are going to be completely dependent on them. So that was probably a period of maybe 6 months. But the response from immigration was actually, I think, pretty quickly because we got a response within, I think, within weeks. So that's when I started then taking college level classes.
That's good. And the family, I take it, knew Spanish, so they were tutoring you and helping you with
Exactly.
the English. That's great.
Yes.
That's very nice. Are you still in touch with them?
Yeah, I actually call them my American mom and dad. Um, yeah, we're very, very close. They still live in Massachusetts. I visited with them last year in Maine, so we're still pretty close. Yeah,
That's good. I'm sure they're very proud of you too, as far as how much you've accomplished. So
yeah,
nice. It's so nice to hear that, because yeah. So I'm sure it was a relief for your mom too, because it's being so far away.
yes, for sure.
So, you went to college. Did you have some
Mhm.
requirements first, like most of us do? And then what point did you focus on being a dietitian?
Yeah, so when I first went to college, I think the first goal, because I think that was the biggest advice that I was given, just take small steps and work on them. Because if you focus on the bigger picture, you're gonna get lost. So I started doing just that. I first aimed to get my associate's degree and in nutrition and dietetics. So at that point, I knew that I had to take all the Common Core classes and I had to take several English courses actually before I could move into other science classes. So I did that. I think probably that was my first year taking college level English classes. And just to make sure that I really understood the language, that I comprehended, that I wrote it. Um, so I think it took me about 3.5 years to complete my associate's degree. During that time, it was actually very enjoyable because I was completely removed from my environment, my comfort zone, and at that time, that's about the time when I also became a Christian. So faith was a big part in all of this because that's how I was able to just stay connected in community. And So that during those 3 years, I started just taking classes, just doing my best. And the part that I enjoyed the most is that I really didn't have any other obligations. It was just studying and doing well in classes, learning English, getting used to the culture. I have to say that the probably the hardest part was not really having deep relationships with people who were my age because of maybe the language, or maybe just because in Massachusetts, in the area where I lived, there wasn't a big Hispanic community. I ended up having probably one or two friends who were pretty close. One of them was from Colombia. So right after we saw each other, we were like, oh, we need to become friends. It was almost like a natural consequence. So the few relationships that I did have with college students were very meaningful. But in the meantime, I was really busy just trying to excel in my classes. That I feel like that was actually, now that I look back at it, it was very enjoyable. I didn't, of course, you don't like it in the moment. You may think that it's never ending and schoolwork. But now that I become a mom and a full time dietitian, I think that was pretty easy back then.
Yeah, it was a breeze. It was your vacation time.
Yes. Yep.
Well, that's good. And definitely, going to community college is always great because it's a savings. It
Yes.
helps you meet other people. I think
Yes.
what I like about community college is that there's people of different age groups, and
Yes.
I think there are people more dedicated than
Absolutely.
than younger kids that go right to a 4 year college. I don't know how there's a difference. I think.
I think so. Yeah.
So and plus you came here, that it's a sacrifice that your parents are doing, so you become very
Yes.
dedicated to making
Exactly.
sure that you do well. So that's a
Correct.
drive. That's
Yep.
good. That's good. How old were
Yes.
you when you came here?
I was 18. I had
Okay.
just turned 18. Yeah.
Okay.
And I did those 3 years of my associate's degree, which I agree with you. It was a really good option for me. And then at the time, I was already dating my now husband, and we decided to get married right after I graduated from that from my associate's degree, and that's when we moved to Cincinnati. He was living in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the time. Um, so we decided that the closest city with reasonable school expenses would be Cincinnati. So I ended up transferring to UC, University of Cincinnati. Mhm.
Oh, okay. So you completed it there. You went for the
Yes.
rest of the program there.
Yes, yes. So my program was, I after I transferred to UC, I had to make up for some credits,
Hmm.
and at that time, I learned about a coordinator program. That is, in order to become a dietitian, you first have to complete an internship, and then it's a year-long internship, and then you have to take a test to be certified in nutrition. So this specific program at UC combined all my college courses with an internship match. I didn't have to apply for any internships. It was just applying for the coordinator program immediately gave you a match for an internship. And I remember when I first transferred to UC, I saw Cincinnati Children's that was next to it, and I've always had a passion to work with children. I've always been drawn to working with children. So when I saw that hospital, that was one of my initial dreams. I want to be there. I want to get my foot in that door. So I had a friend who was taking classes with me, and I noticed that she would wear a Cincinnati Children's shirt. And I asked her, "So what do you do at Children's?" She told me that she was a volunteer, and I said, I need to volunteer. So next thing I know, she made the connections for me to become a volunteer at Children's. I was probably just filing papers for one of the dietitians and just, but I learned later on that that connection was very important in my career because once I was in the system, I was already familiar with the institution. I was working with some dietitians at the time. So later on in my coordinator program, I did an internship. My internship was in food service, different areas, the WIC program, but
Mhm.
one of them was a pediatric concentration at Children's.
Mhm.
So during my concentration at Children's, I had we had to have an interview because only a few of us matched in that concentration. So the fact that I already was part of their system, volunteering, and somewhat a familiar face with some references, it really helped me get in that concentration. So right after the pediatric concentration, I knew that that was a place where I wanted to be. At that time, I was actually right when I was finishing up my internship and every part of my this whole process. I became pregnant with my first child.
Mhm.
So I still remember going back to take finals, and my mom flew from Mexico to be with us to help us out because we know that Latinos, we always if our parents are not with us, and we make them be with us during that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So my mom came, and I remember her coming with me to UC, and I was taking my finals, and I had a newborn, and my mom would stay with her outside of the classroom while I took my final, and then I was done. So I had to do probably maybe 3 or 4 finals, and at that time. I had already completed all my rotations, and there was an opening at Cincinnati Children's for an entry level dietitian.
Mm.
So once again, I had already the past experience of being a volunteer, and I tried my best when I was an intern. I was very dedicated, and they selected. There were probably other 5 people interviewing, and I was actually able to get that job.
Mm.
I told them I'm not yet registered. I have to pass my exam, and I wouldn't be able to start. I think the interview was in July and or June. No, sorry, in May because that's when my daughter was born in May. And I told them I'm not able to start until August. They said it's okay. We'll wait for you.
Wow.
So it was really I was just truly truly blessed to have that opportunity and that's where I've been. That was my first job as a pediatric dietitian,
Mhm.
and I specialized in for 7 years in treating eating disorders. The part, I mean, I serve a large Spanish speaking population at work. There's a large community here in
Mhm.
Cincinnati. And right now, I recently moved to a different area within the hospital, so I'm trying to just expand my knowledge. Hmm.
Yeah. So, that's a good point you mentioned about the community there. I've been to Cincinnati, for conferences, and actually it was for the National Society of Hispanic MBAs, and
Hmm.
that's where I saw this huge community there,
Yeah,
very large. So that's really good that you're in that area. I think that they probably had you in mind for that too when they
yeah,
wanted you to be there. Are you the
yes.
only dietitian Latina there, or are there others?
For about 7 years, I was. There was a lactation consultant who she works in our department, but is she's a lactation consultant.
Mm.
And then I would say within the past year, there was another person who was hired as well. But we were definitely the minority.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
and yet as a population, we're the majority, and we have a
Yes,
lot of, especially children, need to understand.
yes.
That's hard.
Interestingly, when I went to college, I don't remember ever meeting someone who majored in nutrition um, who is also Latina.
Mm,
I was the only one, I think, in all my classes who was a Latina.
yeah. Yeah, when you don't see her, you don't think about being, a Latina. So I think that that's a reason why I produced this, and the mentor mentee app that we're doing is because, we want to show that these positions exist, and not so much that, but it's really necessary as
It
as we
is.
grow. Latinos are high in diabetes, and how are
Yeah.
we going to, take care of that if we don't have enough of us in there
Yes.
in those fields to help our own community understand, especially being bilingual. That's
Yeah.
even a plus because we have new immigrants coming in from South America and Central and North, and we need to help them because it's a whole different way of life. There's a lot of fast food because a lot of them working in labor. So
Yeah.
it's a concern. I mean, it's a concern for everybody. I think people get turned around a lot about eating more healthy.
Yes.
Um, and I think some fast foods have tried
Yes. They've
with the
tried.
Impossible Burger, which became my favorite. But I don't know how healthy that Impossible Burger is at Burger King. But
I know.
it's deceiving, but I try. I
Yes.
also like that if I go there. But yeah, a lot of those things are good. That's great. So, if you were to turn back time, given everything you've gone through, and you were just starting out, you can be in Mexico before you come here or here. What advice would you give yourself, knowing everything you've gone through? There's something in particular you would have wanted to give yourself an advice on, or
That's a good question. That's I maybe one piece of advice or something that I absolutely don't regret is spending all the time that I did just being the best student. I wanted to invest the time, the effort, and make it worth the money. Being an international student, or just an international student during my first 3 years was extremely expensive,
yeah,
and that made me realize that there's a lot of value. The other piece of advice was also just looking at just short term goals, because I think that kept me focused, motivated. I think I just, looking back, I'm glad that I first took the goal of I need to learn English. And then I can apply. And then I can start taking college level courses. So it was just this little by little getting my associate's degree. And I felt like it was I was able to see a lot of doors that were opened because I was in a better mental space. I wasn't as overwhelmed, as I wasn't as stressed. And I feel like sometimes we miss that when we just overdo. We live in a society that says go, go, go. The more you do, the better.
yeah.
Um, and I think we have to look back and make sure that what we're doing it well, because we can be doing 10 things, but we're not doing them right. But we can be doing a couple things and really doing them well. And that's why I think I was able to then find more open doors.
Yeah, that's good. And I think the one thing that I like about your journey is that you had your first child and you still were going, for your exam and everything. And of course, we have the support of our moms, which is really something I think our culture it's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're very fortunate in that.
Yes.
But it's good that you mentioned that because things happen. I know a lot of us
Yes.
have different, either get married earlier or we have children, but we keep going. And the most important thing is that we have that opportunity here. You can continue college
Yes.
and not stop and continue taking your exam and even get a job, and I like how they waited for you. They understood. I think it's, that's key as well because you were very assertive in
Yes.
telling them, I can't start right away. And where some
Yes.
Latinos might say, oh, what am I going to do? But no, it's good that you said that. You were right on the dot as far as immediately. So
Yeah.
I thought it was great.
Yes, and I mean, we live in this country that is full of opportunities for everyone, right? So I think that's something unique that we see in this country. So it's really just taking advantage of those opportunities. I always say you'll always get a no unless you ask. So that's what I always did. I just asked and knocked on the door, and it would have been a no if I didn't ask.
Yes, you're right. If you don't ask, you'll never know. So
Yeah.
I like that. I want to thank you, first of all, so much for sharing with us your journey. I think it's so valuable that Latinas hear about this, and important career that I think we don't have enough Latinas in. And hearing your story and knowing that you always face challenges, but you can overcome them. And your last words of always ask, don't be afraid of asking is great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, this concludes Ask the Latina. Thank you for being with us, and I hope you join us in the next. Thank you.